Hi everybody, welcome along. Uh, we'll just give people another 1 or 2 minutes to get logged in. Uh, just like last week, we'd ask that people can chuck their screens on mute. We'll have time for questions at a couple of points during the talk. And we'll give it another 2 minutes and then or a minute or so, and then we'll let the talking start. Today we're going to be talking about quality stepping stones and handrails. If you came to last week's talk, great. We're going to be building on what we talked about last week, but these principles also stand up on their own. So if you missed last week's talk, that's all good. Hopefully you'll still get something out of this as well. Just as like a bit of housekeeping before we get started, we're putting the links up on the Orienteering New Zealand Slack page. Slack is a kind of communications platform that ONZ is starting to use. And I'm emailing the link out to a few clubs as well. But if you would like to receive the link directly, just send myself a message or Jean a message. You can probably find either of our contact details pretty easily online. Just look for Jean's blog and send him an email. Cool. All right. I think what we might do is we've given it a few minutes. We might get started now. So, Jean, tell us about stepping stones and handrails.
Hi guys. Yeah, today we're going to look at quality stepping stones and handrails, and also attack points. The attack point being the final crucial stepping stone before you get to your control. And we're going to look at a variety of maps and break down some legs. We'll do it similar to last time, where I will go through the first few myself, and Tom can weigh in, and then we'll merge more towards getting some ideas from you guys towards the end. So we'll jump into our first leg here. This is a farmland area in the Hawke's Bay. And the runnability is quite good here. So it's short grass, really fast. You can see the distinctive trees on the map dotted around these little marshes and watercourses. So it's really quite free flowing. You could go wherever you want, but we're going to look for ways to make this as safe as possible. So we're going to plan out a route from 13 to 14. And I'm going to identify some lines in the terrain that can be really helpful to help me get safely and confidently from 13 to 14. The first thing that stands out to me is you've got this big hill and ridge line running along here, and that's really notable because it takes up 90% of the leg. So it's not very often that you get such a nice handrail that can take you so close to the control. You don't even have to keep jumping from one handrail to another. You don't have to think of a lot of different stepping stones. And this is a great handrail for a few reasons. One, it takes you so close to the control. And another reason is that it's so distinctive. This ridge line here with these contours coming through like this, it's really safe to follow in the terrain. So people who are up to heading into doing red level orienteering, you should be confident using distinctive contour features like this. And so I think this is to not use such a clear handrail would be a bit of a waste, in my opinion. You're muted, Tom.
Just to recap on that, so handrails are line features in the terrain, things that kind of run in straight lines or form edges, and you're saying that they don't just have to be tracks or things, they can also be contour based. Can you use other things for them as well?
Yep, you could use pretty much anything you want that you can imagine an imaginary path along. So the most obvious linear feature to follow would be like a track or a fence. And that's something you could basically hold onto with your hands. But yeah, it could be something like a ridge line, like in this in this case, where there's actually nothing physical to hold on to with your hands, but with your eyes, you can see the line through the terrain.
Okay, cool.
Cool. We'll jump on to our second example.
So you've said that we can use edges like contours. Also, you could use edges of detail. So maybe if you had a whole clump of rocks, for example, or a big area that was all broken terrain, you could find the edge of that and use that as a handrail.
That's right. So we'll get into another good example here where we can see, again, this is open terrain, but there's a lot more going on. So that first example I showed you was quite clear that there was a really nice handrail to use through the leg. And now on this leg, it's not quite so clear. We're going to go from 4 to 5 in this particular example. So the terrain here consists of some quite steep valleys with streams and marshes in the valleys. And we've got some big cliffs up on the hillsides. In order to get from 4 to 5, we're going to have to find our way through the valleys and then get back up the hill to 5.
So what are the linear features that you might use as a handrail here, Gene?
So the ones that stand out the most to me are these big streams that are coursing, these water courses and streams that are moving through the terrain here. And I think it's quite, you will definitely see these streams. At least you'll see the big valleys that they're traveling in. But the interesting thing about these streams, some of them are going to be more distinctive than others. So the main streams down the center of the valleys that I've marked in red are going to be quite distinct. But some of these smaller marshes that I'm drawing on now are really not going to be very distinct because they don't have the big contour features to mark out where they are. So although they look really similar on the map, it's just blue, a thin blue line, you really have to pay attention to what is going to stand out the most in the terrain before you choose to use them. So the streams that I've got marked on now are good. Those little ones I want to ignore. But the things that stand out the most to me might not be the things that are most easily interpreted on the map, but this big area of rock, which is going to be hard to kind of imagine exactly what it looks like, but you will see it overall. You will see this huge, big series of cliffs up on the hillside. And you don't have to know exactly what shape. You don't have to know all of the details in this big area of cliffs. You just have to know that there's a whole lot of rock going on and it's all up on the hillside, and I just have to stay to the side of it. I can keep it in my sight, and that's a really useful stepping stone to use. Another one that I think is quite unique is this boulder here. The reason why...
Hey, Gene, just to quickly recap that. So what you're saying is, on the map, sometimes you might have something that looks really visually obvious on paper, like a stream, but in reality, it doesn't make a really good handrail because it's not very obvious in the terrain.
That's right. So some of the streams, I think the blue really stands out a lot. And because streams are nice straight lines, they really stand out to us on paper. And these big areas of black are often look really chaotic. But
okay.
if we generalize, if we try to push that aside and realize that you can group the chaos as a stepping stone and just acknowledge that there's a big chunk of rocky chaos up on the hillside, and that becomes one big blob.
Okay, so we've jumped from, we've talked about handrails. We're now kind of introducing the concept of stepping stones as well. So we've talked about using the edge of detail as a handrail. Can you define stepping stones a bit more clearly for us?
Yeah, we should really define that a little bit better. So in contrast to a handrail, which is like if you're going down a steep staircase, you're holding onto a handrail so that you don't lose your footing. A stepping stone is a very distinctive feature in the terrain that can help you get to the next distinctive feature or to the next handrail. But instead of being a line in the terrain, it's just one localized distinctive feature. So a handrail could be one of these streams that I've marked on the map. Whereas something that is and you can follow one of these streams, you just have to keep your eyes on it and run down it. You can't fall off the stream. Whereas a really good example of a stepping stone is this boulder here. So that single boulder is a point in the terrain. When you find that boulder, you'll know exactly where you are, but you can't follow it. It's not something that's going to lead you on towards your control. So it has an advantage that you know exactly where you are when you have the stepping stone, but it doesn't have the same advantage of a handrail that keeps pulling you in the direction you want to go. That's how I'd define them.
Okay. So in other words, you could say that a stepping stone is like a discrete, distinct feature in the terrain that's somewhere where you can know that you're exactly there. So we've talked about a rock here. Some other ones would maybe be like a distinctive hill or a lake in the terrain, maybe a tree or a saddle. Saddles are really good stepping stones.
Yeah, so it's something, the most obvious things, like on this map, for example, if you look at, I'm circling this distinctive tree, it's a nice point in the terrain that you can use. And yeah, you can then broaden out a little bit from a point feature. And yeah, like a saddle is really good because you know you're not too far up or too far down, you're not too far north or south, that there is a point in the terrain that is the center of the saddle, and you can use that to know exactly where you are.
Okay, you said some point features are good. What's the problem with using all those features that are to the south of Control 6? All those funny shaped rocks and cliffs. Why would I use those as stepping stones?
So yeah, that's good. We'll just let's see if I can. Oh yeah, it's on the screen. So the ones Tom was talking about is these guys here, right?
Yeah, there's lots of them. That's quite a distinct feature to me.
Yeah, I mean they're massive as well. These are going to be big in the terrain, but there's lots of them, and they're going to look similar. And if you get the wrong one, it's going to be hard for you to tell if you're too high or too low, exactly which one you're on. Whereas if you were to use the distinctive tree, I mean, there's really only two distinctive trees, and one of them's down by the river, and one of them's halfway up the hillside. So the chances of making and making an error there is a lot less to use the feature that's less common on the map.
Okay, so to like kind of say that in other words and summarize it, we've got stepping stones which are different from handrails. Stepping stones are these distinct, discrete features that are spaced along a leg that are really identifiable and unique that we can use to break the leg up. Would that be fair?
Yeah. When choosing a good stepping stone, it needs to stand out. It needs to be really obvious exactly what it is. And that's why those cliffs are a bad choice, because you won't be able to single out your precise stepping stone from a distance because there's too many of them.
Cool. Got it. So before, when we sort of went to define stepping stones, you were saying about this league 4 to 5 that we would use a combination of handrails and stepping stones to simplify this league down. Do you want to talk us through that and like what you do?
Yeah. So now that we've had a look at the terrain and between controls 4 and 5, you can see the lines that I've drawn to show the handrails and the stepping stones that I've identified. I'll add one last stepping stone close to 5 that I think I want to use as my attack point. And it's actually this gap. It's this gully between two cliffs. So you've got the contour features and sandwich between these massive cliffs. So that's going to be my attack point. And the way I would produce a little plan, a little checklist for me to use on 4 to 5 would be to run. So 4's on this boulder. I would run directly down the hill to the stream.
So that's your direction, right? And then you're going to simplify.
Yep. So the plan has been, I would have kind of planned this in advance, and imagine this is me talking through my plan before I get to number 4, or perhaps I'm at number 4 planning it out. So yeah, this is part of my simplification. I'm choosing to, I'm going to plan to run down this watercourse, and I'm going to get to this junction in the valleys here. So you've got one valley in coming one valley there, and the valley that I'm running down, and they join. So that's going to be, that can be a stepping stone if you like, but at that point, so the reason why those two joining as a stepping stone is because it's a distinctive point. It's the junction of two valleys. You can't be too high, too low, too far left, too far right. It's a distinctive point. So once I get to that junction of the valleys, I'm going to use this big area of crazy rocks that we talked about before, and I'm going to stay below the crazy rocks. I'm going to stay on the hillside. I'm going to leave the stream behind. I'm going to look for my next stepping stone, which is that boulder that we talked about, sitting there on its own. And I'm going to stay above the boulder and below the crazy rocks. And I'm going to continue on that line. And then I'm looking up the hill for the gap that I talked about. The big valley between the two big cliffs. And my control is below this massive cliff, huge cliff. And so from my attack point, I'm just following along the edge of the massive cliff to get there. So that is the first example on that other map was really simple with one really nice handrail, and you've got to use it when you get them, when you get such a safe leg like that. But this is an example of how we can turn what seems to be a more complicated leg into some quite simple steps just by using these nice lines in the terrain that we call handrails, and these very distinctive points in the terrain that we call stepping stones.
Cool. Sounds good, Gene. Shall we jump onto the next map?
Yeah. Yep.
What's the terrain we're looking at for the next one?
I might do another one on this map actually. It's a slightly different.
Is it a bit longer?
Yeah, it's a longer one.
Okay. So while Gene's pulling that up, it's a really good chance to mention that handrails and stepping stones can be applied in different ways on different leagues. A stepping stone, you would think, is something which you might only need on a long leg, like your longest leg in your course, because you need to break it up to be able to navigate. Yeah, so like this huge long leg. Stepping stones are going to be mandatory on that leg because there's no way that you can think about that all in one piece. So you might break that up into a bunch of almost like mini leagues as you go between stepping stones. Mm-hmm. But we're suggesting as well that you use stepping stones on even really short leagues, like the one that we've talked about so far, 4 to 5. Yep. And it's also useful on more medium length leagues like this next one we're going to talk about. Yeah. So stepping stones are useful everywhere, and the same can be said for handrails. If you've got a little short league, you can make that more simple by just saying, oh, there's a nice straight line. I'm going to pick that up. I'm going to run on that. I'm going to get rid of all that extra cognitive load of having to identify many features and hopefully be a lot more accurate.
Yeah, that's right. Reduce the risk.
Alrighty, 13 to 14. This one looks pretty complicated.
So yeah, if we look at the map just for a second, we see there's a lot of little black things, lots of boulder fields, some smaller boulders, some larger boulders, little funny shaped cliffs. There's a lot going on. And remember what I said before, if something doesn't stand out in the terrain, if it's not going to be obvious from a distance, then it's not a good stepping stone. So you can basically discount most of the black in this area because it doesn't stand out. It's not terribly unique. It's very repetitive. So we want to ignore quite a lot of the detail that you can see on the map between controls 13 and 14. So what does that leave us with?
We've got this.
What stands out to you, Tom?
Well, I would think we could think about this in terms of both handrails and stepping stones. And the first thing I kind of saw was kind of two big handrails. So One is the kind of ridge along on the left, running north from 13 round to 14. So I thought that looked like a pretty obvious handrail. And then there's also another like kind of composite handrail, I guess you could call it, where if you go south from 13, you can pick up a fence, and then the fence goes to a creek. And so you've got like a very tempting handrail when you look at the map, but maybe from like what we've said before, maybe in the terrain, maybe not quite as good as something contour based. I don't know. What do you think?
Yep, I see both those options also. And I think the stream going out to the east will be really distinctive. The fence is really safe as well. So there's a lot of positives about going that the southeastern route. The northwestern route also has some positives with that. That ridge line is quite safe. There's some risk about coming down the wrong spur, but we can be patient and get a good direction using our compass to make sure we use the right spur. But I do like that these are safe lines in the terrain. So we have options, but we're going to have to get right into the control circle as well. So we're going to have to be more precise to finish this leg off.
That's right. We kind of need some, even if we get onto one of these handrail features, because they both run past the control, we're going to need some stepping stones in combination with those handrails to make sure we come off the handrail at the right time.
Yep, that's right. So we're going to have to get a little bit smarter. Let's take the southeastern route, and we'll go through that one first. So to exit from 13, you're basically just running straight down the valley to the fence line. Super safe. You've got a marsh if you're interested, but it's very safe. Just running downhill will guarantee that you get to the fence. Then you just have to follow the fence out to the big stream. Then you follow the stream to the north. And as Tom said, we need to have a way of getting off these handrails. We need a stepping stone, which is a distinctive point in the terrain to catch us from following the handrail, which is a line in the terrain. Now, the thing I really like on this stream that if you pay a lot of attention actually stands out. It's a cliff. It's a big cliff, and it's longer than anything else in that area, and it's right on the stream. That
it's also got trees behind it, which is a bit unique.
It's unique. That guy there, if we pay attention, is actually quite unique. There's no other cliff along the edge of the stream here. There's some cliffs that are further away from the stream. So yeah, it's not, it's not as unique as this tree here, which is like, there's nothing else. There's no other trees. Anyway, there are no other single trees by themselves. But this big cliff has, that other feature. It's got the trees. It's long. It's right beside the stream. So I think that combination of things is good enough for us to use that big cliff as a stepping stone. The next handrail for us is getting a little bit more advanced, but this is the step up to red level, is getting confident with the contours. We're going to follow this ridge line, this up to the, so we can see the contours come along. Here we've got this nice spur that we're following up to get to our control, which is on a boulder that's directly on the spur. So we have to stay on the point of that spur going up the hill, and we actually get taken straight to our control. So yeah, it looks complicated, but we can break it down. And if we're really disciplined and we're looking for the big cliff, we can leave the stream at the right time. And if we stay focused on the contours and stay on top of that spur, that ridge running up the hill, then we can get to the right boulder.
Cool. So it sounds like the key thing on this leg was trying to look for things that would be obvious in the terrain, not things that are obvious on the map when they're printed.
That's right. If you look at the colors on the map, it all just becomes overwhelming. There's all this black on the map, and it's all just as black as everything else. All the contours are wiggling everywhere. You've got to get deeper into what the map's telling you to really see what stands out and what doesn't stand out.
Cool. Should we
I'd
move
also,
away from rock terrain and just looking
yep,
at the time, just to keep things moving?
yep,
Should we
yep,
jump across to a sand dune map? Because I had a couple of
yeah,
comments from people
probably.
last week regarding Woodhill maps, especially.
So your lucky day. So we'll, which one was I going to look at? We'll look at a longer one, a middle, a medium length leg.
Okay. So this looks like
In here.
This is from Woodmasters.
This is a nasty leg that I've chosen for you guys. It's a nasty piece of work.
Okay.
So
we're doing 15 to 16, right?
We're doing 15 to 16. And if you are fairly terrified, that's okay. So am I. This is a hard leg, but we're going to make it.
It's one which asks you to run wide, isn't it? That's one which makes you think, actually, maybe I'll just get a drink. I'll just head south, go past the 2 drinks controls, come up the track.
Yeah.
Just bail out that way.
Yeah. So
right. How would you do it?
So there's a few things to look for in this. And the more we practice this, the less we'll become overwhelmed by the amount of detail on the map, and the more we can just focus on the key parts of this map that can really stand out to us. So I first just want to start by tabling that, yes, there's a really safe way if you just take a compass bearing north, and yeah, you can follow the track around and get quite close. I want to just regard that just for the purpose of us better understanding how to simplify the contours in this particular case.
Okay, so let's pretend the track's not there.
Yeah. Or yeah, we're going for the win, and we're going straight. So the way I wanted to break down this particular leg is, firstly, out of 15, you can see that there's a higher area up here, and there's the lower area up here. So let's just get a vibe for this terrain. It's going from lower to higher here. It's going from lower to higher. So we can just, if you need to take a bit of time to look at the contours to get the feel for it, because that's where you're at in your orienteering, then take the time and really get a feel for what's happening. But just appreciating that there's a slope going up like that. Then I think the next thing we're really looking for is this big spur here. That
so
really
stepping stone, maybe.
Yeah. So I think this is the stepping stone, given the direction we're coming from. We're going to get our direction sorted. Out of 15, we're going to run not up, not down, but stay on our height. So we're going to contour along, and we can also use our compass to get our direction right. And this hill is going to be coming across in front of our faces. So you're going to hit that. So I think that's a really good stepping stone. We want to keep our direction. And this is the thing about sand dune terrain, is you're taking this shortcut the whole time and not having to know everything that's going on, because you are using your compass quite a lot. So if you're sometimes saying, hey, Gene, whoa, how am I going to get from one point to the other? You haven't said how you're going from one point to the other. You're using your direction. You're using your compass, and you're taking these 100-meter steps between your stepping stones. The next stepping stone that I really like here is the track. Never disregard the track. Never leave the track without knowing exactly where you are. It's the easiest opportunity you're going to get in the whole race, to know exactly where you are. Don't waste it. I think the corners here stand out, so you want to see how far away from the corner of the track you are. The next big stepping stone that I like is this depression. Depression's always good, and the visibility is quite good since the forest is white. So then I'm taking a direction here. The next stepping stone I'm looking for is, again, this other nice depression. You could even say this is a bit of a handrail, because you're following this low point along. Whatever way you want to break it down is fine. I think it works either way. You're then looking for the next depression. So you can see this repeating pattern with the sand dune terrain is, you've got these stepping stones and you're lining them up with the compass, boom, 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 knocking them off one by one. I think I quite like this ridge line, this little ridge here, but you could skip the ridge and again look for the next depression. So you can see this repeating pattern that really breaks down what is a terrifying leg into a number of quite simple steps.
Okay, cool. That sounds good. So this is a pretty, first of all, just for everyone, this is a pretty advanced leg, and this is a pretty advanced way to do it. But you can see how you can identify these distinct features, and it doesn't matter if your stepping stones are one after the other the same thing. That's okay. But these are all going to be distinct low points in the terrain that you just jump between to break the leg up.
Yeah.
Do we have a maybe slightly easier sand dune leg that we could have a look at?
Yeah. I think even myself, I would be in a race situation. I would be, seriously considering trying to get out to the track and run along to make my life simpler. But for those who are asking, how do you simplify sand dune terrain? How do you simplify the contours in sand dune terrain? This is the answer to your question. These stepping stones lined up with compass. Yeah. So I had another leg here that was a much easier one that I think I want to give the listeners a chance to do it in their heads quickly. I think you'll see some nice features to use here.
So we're thinking 18 to 19, right?
Yeah, that's 18 to 19.
Okay, and we're going to think about handrails that are not necessarily the most obvious thing on the map, so not necessarily a track. And we're going to want to spot a few stepping stones along the way to help keep us on track.
We'll give them a little bit of time.
All right, could I maybe have a crack at this one, Gene?
Yeah, go for it.
So we'll get you to draw this on
draw.
as I describe.
Yep.
So when I look at this leg, I'm thinking, okay, there's quite a lot still going on between these two controls, but I can see some really nice big slopes. So there's the one that exits the control that kind of heads east and then a bit of a hook, and then heads kind of northeast. So that really big steep slope is one handrail I can see.
Yep. So this is, I'm hitting, so that, these arrows are facing down. So, I mean, that's the way you want to model it in your head, is steep slope, and that's the down direction.
Cool. So I've got that big slope. So I want to keep that on my left. And then if I come around, I can see this other steep slope that's kind of from the mid portion of the leg, almost round to the control. So that would be my other handrail. So that's a couple of lines drawn in the terrain. The arrows are pointing down again. And then I need to select some good stepping stones. So we've got a track in the middle, which is a nice way to break it up. It's tempting to try and use all the hilltops and things along the top, but to me, those things look pretty much the same. I wonder if the best stepping stones to me are these big gullies on the south-facing slope. There's one which is, there's the track, and then just beyond the track, there's another big one. And then, it's tricky, but there is another one about just above the beginning of the 9. There's kind of one there where they've split the leg. So one there, and then there's another one. Yep, you're just about to draw it on there. Yep. So I've got these 2 stepping stones, and then to the north of the control, there's a big depression, and that's quite unique. So that's probably my stepping stone or attack point, and it's okay that it's beyond the control because we've got good visibility. This is white forest. So I'd follow the handrail of the big slope on my left for the starters. Then I'd pop over to have a handrail on my right. I'd cross the track as my first stepping stone. I'd identify the gully as my second. Then I'd go to another stepping stone that's about halfway along the top of the ridge, and I'd keep on my handrail until I can start to see the big depression on my left. And that's my attack point into the control. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I think that's quite good. I think the risks of this leg are obviously the second to last stepping stone, this small
Yeah.
re-entrant here, is on the small side.
Yep, totally agree.
But therein lies the challenge. If you're disciplined and you get this stepping stone with confidence, you're ahead of the competition. It is a hard leg. This is what red level orienteering challenges you with.
How about this? Perhaps when you get to the track, you could drop down the slope, run around the bottom of the slope until you got to the spur where it kind of comes back on itself, and then go up the spur into the control. That would be another possibility, maybe. Another way to use that handrail and have a more distinctive stepping stone. But the downside being you've got to climb like 5 contours.
Right. So we've got the option for those that are getting more confident, and if someone's more freshly up from orange level to red level, then the green alternative of staying at the bottom of the slope and then running up the big spur as you're running along the bottom here, the spur will begin to loom out. The spur here will begin to loom out in front of you, and you just have to run up it. My next concern about this leg, you would be seeing that depression, because sometimes the depressions are obviously not as visible as a hill, because there's an invisibility. The land drops away from you and you might not be able to see the depression. So how do you think you would combat that risk?
I know it's something which we haven't really talked about in this talk so far, but on my compass, I'd maybe think about, on the second, maybe think really hard about my compass and maybe even aiming off.
Yeah, or one way is, without introducing a new technique, is just remember that the big slope that we're following here as we run along here, we don't have to be exactly on the top of the slope, and perhaps we can run kind of more here, and we can still see the slope. And if we're following that second blue line, then we're running on those hilltops, and we should be able to see the depression a little bit better. I mean, that's the way I would see, is just make sure you're not hidden on the slope, and put yourself up as high as you can so that you can see as much as possible. And if you are too far north, then you'll run headlong into the depression and then go, oh, okay.
Cool. Okay. While we think about another example, shall we just see if anyone's got any questions?
Yeah, I think we've covered a lot in a very short space of time.
We have had one here, which is I can see a written comment about a bit more about contour interpretation. I think probably what we might leave a resource in the chat at the end, which maybe directs you to some other places. I think that's a pretty big topic, and we're trying to keep these talks. They're probably like sort of the next level past that, being able to do contour interpretation.
Or I'll stay on like I did last time for 5 minutes at the end, and we can have off-topic questions.
Okay, cool. And so if anyone's got any questions or burning questions they wanted to ask just while we queue up this last route, feel free to send them as a message in the chat, or chuck your microphone off and ask away. But in the meantime, Jean's going to pull up a last league which we can talk about.
So this is another example in sand dune terrain, but it's not all white forest this time. We've got a mix of rough open areas in some of the coastal dunes. So those rougher areas are pretty slow going, and there's no pine trees in them. There's long grasses, and I quite like to wall them off. It's an area I don't particularly want to run through because it's slow going, and it's very distinctive in the terrain. There's a clear difference between pine trees and not pine trees.
It's a good handrail, right?
Yeah. So the edge of these areas. Sorry, I didn't draw that one very well. The edge of these areas makes for a very good handrail. We're going from 4 to 5 here, just to clarify that. Some other things that stand out to me in this terrain is obviously the track here. That's a really nice one. It's probably just going to be some little motorbike track, so it's not going to be the most visible from a distance. But once I'm on it, it's so safe. So that makes it quite a good handrail.
Downside though in Woodhill in this coastal strip is often the forest is way faster than those real sandy motorbike
Yeah,
tracks.
they're
So it
so
looks
sandy
good,
sometimes.
but it might actually not be that fast in terms of running
Yep,
speed. So safe nav, but maybe a bit of a trade-off for speed.
that's right. The other features in this terrain are smaller, but we will have to extend our gaze towards them. Firstly, towards the start of the leg, so exiting 4, there's this ridge line here that we're going to cross at some stage if we choose to, and I think that you could use the edge of it as a handrail, or perhaps the edge of it isn't what you want to use. You just want to consider it as a line of hills, just a ridge line in the terrain running in a very distinctive direction. And towards the end of 4 to 5, coming into 5, the things that I think stand out the most to me, and this area around 5 is fairly flat, the details are small, so I know this is going to be pushing those who are less experienced with red level orienteering. The things that stand out to me is this low point through here. It's quite nice and just lower than there's a hill here, and this is a hill here, and this lower gap therefore stands out as a gap. Same for this shape here. You can see the little taglines there. It's a depression. It's the gap between the high point here and the high point there, and it stands out. So that's my breakdown of the handrails on this leg. And so from 4 to 5, the way I would do it would be, firstly, good direction using the compass. We're going to just run with good direction, and we're going to hit this handrail. Boom. Surely we can't miss it. Now I'm going to run along the handrail to the track. I'm just going to follow the track to the end of the track. Then I'm going to stay in this low point. Again, compass is going to be important here. We can drift, but just don't run uphill. Just stay in the low point. And we get carried right to the control, which is in a small depression. Just don't run uphill. Once you're in that last flat bit, stay on the flat. And we get there. So that's how I would break down that leg, and I'd feel very safe doing it in those decisive steps.
Nice. I guess we're coming up to the end of our time, but that really raised one sort of last good point, I think, which was around the use of handrails and line features in the terrain. You can travel parallel to them, but you can also use them as a perpendicular feature. Sometimes people call that a catching feature, or a feature that's going to catch you as you run through the terrain.
Yeah.
But drawing lines, and I actually remember getting coached on this years ago by Tanya Robinson, who called them train tracks. You're trying to identify train tracks in the terrain and link them up and form junctions to run between. Should we do a quick recap?
Yes. So sorry, could I just double down on that point there with
sure, yeah, totally.
With the handrails here, mainly this this one that's perpendicular to the line that we're traveling. You might at first be like, whoa, Gene, you're just, we're not at that level. You're just taking this massive compass bearing through the forest. Like, we can't do that. Well, it depends on the size of your feature. Now, this catching feature here is a ridge line with spotted clearings along it. That's like 200 meters long. And at one end of it is a track, and at the other end of it is the open dunes. Like, there's, if you describe it properly to yourself, like, you're basically enclosed here. Like, there's really no way to screw it up if you're paying attention. It's very safe, and therefore you can take a ballsier compass bearing. Maybe that's a distance 200 meters through the forest that you're not used to taking a compass bearing that long. But bear in mind just how robust the the handrails being used as catching features are in this particular case. Yeah, thanks, Tom.
Cool. All right, so we'll just do a quick wrap up of points, and then if you've got questions, we'll hang around for a little bit afterwards. So today we've been talking about quality stepping stones and handrails. This is a really important part of simplifying down each leg when you're doing an orienteering course. So a handrail is a linear feature that's obvious in the terrain that forms an edge that you can follow. The idea being it's a simple way to stay in a direction while you're moving. Remember that you want to choose something that's going to be easy to see in the map, physically in the terrain, rather than something that's easily seen when it's printed. We also talked about stepping stones. So stepping stones, in contrast to a handrail, are a distinct, discrete feature, like a point, where there is only one. It shows your location where you are exactly. They should be obvious, pretty unique, and you can use them frequently to break a leg up into little pieces. You should combine handrails with stepping stones to help with coming up with your route choice.
And especially if there's any other off-topic questions. Back, Tom. You're muted.
Sorry about that, my Zoom crashed.
Damn.
Did you get the end of that? I'm sure you've wrapped it up anyway.
Yeah, we've summarized our points about stepping stones and handrails. So next time you do have a map in front of you, hopefully you can look at the terrain in that light. You can see the lines, you can see the distinctive points that stands out, and you can draw your own handrails and circle your own stepping stones and break down what might be quite a complex leg into some simpler parts that you can knock off with confidence and keep moving and don't lose big time.
Cool. So next week we'll do another one of these, same time, and we're probably going to talk about speed control or traffic lights. So thanks for listening, and keep an eye on the ONZ Slack page for the link. Otherwise, I'll email it out to some of the clubs again. Thanks.
Sweet. And I'll just hang around if there's any other questions. So I can answer some questions on the chat.